The asteroid storm came without warning. Park had been sleeping in her small survey ship when the first rock hit. The impact threw her from her bed and sent her crashing into the wall. Alarms screamed. Red lights flashed. The ship's computer shouted warnings that she could barely hear over the sound of metal tearing apart. She was not a pilot. She had spent 15 years studying alien life forms on distant worlds. She knew how to identify bacteria on frozen moons and catalog plants on jungle planets. But she did not know how to fly a damaged ship through a storm of rocks the size of houses. The ship fell. It fell for what felt like forever, strapped herself into the pilot's seat and held on. She prayed to God she was not sure she believed in. She thought about her mother back on Earth, who had told her not to take this mission. She thought about the small apartment in Seoul where she had grown up, where her grandmother had sung her songs at night. Then the ship hit the ground. The world went black. When woke up, she was cold, colder than she had ever been in her life. The ship was broken. Half of it was missing. Snow was coming in through a hole in the ceiling, and the wind outside sounded like a dying animal. She was on 4, an ice moon at the edge of known space. She had come here to study the frozen microbes that lived beneath the surface. Now she was going to die here. But Park was not the kind of person who gave up easily. She pulled herself from the wreckage. Her leg was hurt but not broken. Her head was bleeding, but she was alive. She found her emergency pack in the ruins of her cabin, food for 2 weeks, water tablets, a medical kit, a thermal blanket that would keep her warm if she found shelter. She looked at the frozen wasteland around her, nothing but ice and rocks and snow. The wind cut through her suit like knives. If she stayed in the ship, she would freeze. She needed to find somewhere better. Her scanner, cracked but working, showed a structure 3 kilometers to the north. An old mining facility abandoned decades ago. It would have walls, maybe heat, maybe a chance to survive. Started walking. It took her 4 hours to reach the facility. By the time she arrived, she could not feel her fingers or toes. Her lips were blue. Her eyebrows were frozen. But she made it. She found a door that still opened. She went inside. She found a room with walls that blocked the wind. She made a fire using chemicals from her kit. She wrapped herself in her thermal blanket. She ate a ration pack that tasted like cardboard but filled her stomach. And then she cried. She cried because she was alone. She cried because no one would find her. She cried because she was 34 years old and she had never married, never had children, never done half the things she had dreamed of doing. She cried until she had no more tears. Then she wiped her face, took a deep breath, and started planning. 3 days later, another ship fell from the sky. Saw it happen. She was outside the facility trying to repair her scanner when the fire streaked across the dark sky. The ship was much bigger than hers. It was shaped like a blade, black and sharp and dangerous. It spun as it fell, pieces breaking off and burning away. It crashed 2 kilometers to the east, and the impact shook the ground beneath her feet. She should have been happy. Another ship meant other survivors. Other survivors meant rescue. But something about that ship made her stomach tight with fear. She had seen pictures of ships like that in her training files. She knew what species flew them. Every human learned about them when they were young. They were the monsters of the galaxy, 7 feet tall, covered in dark fur. They had claws that could cut through metal and teeth that could crush bone. They had built an empire through war and fear. They did not make friends. They made slaves, or corpses. Had never met she had hoped she never would. She watched the crash site through her scanner. She saw heat signatures, movement. Someone had survived, maybe several someones, and her scanner told her they were coming closer. She could hide. She could run. She could try to make herself invisible and hope they passed her by. But thought about the cold. She thought about the wind. She thought about how she had felt those first few hours after her crash, when death seemed like a certainty. She thought about how much she had wanted anyone to help her. She stayed where she was. They arrived at sunset. There was only one at first, a male. He was even bigger than she had imagined, and his fur was dark as night. His eyes glowed yellow in the dim light. There was blood on his chest and arms, and she could not tell if it was his own. He moved like a predator, silent and careful, his head turning to catch every sound. When he saw her, he stopped. His heart pounded so hard she thought it might break her ribs. Every part of her wanted to run, but she forced herself to stay still. She made her hands unclench. She kept her voice calm. "You're hurt," she said. "Do you need help?" The stared at her. She could see confusion in his yellow eyes. He had expected many things when he came to this facility. A threat, a trap, a fight. He had not expected a small, soft creature with no claws and no fangs to offer him help. His name was. He was a commander in the fleet, a warrior who had conquered worlds. But right now, he was just a father whose family was dying. His mate was back at the crash site. She was hurt badly. The medical bay had been destroyed in the crash. Their communications were dead, and their 3 cubs were alone with her, too young to help, too scared to understand. Had come looking for supplies, or enemies, or anything that might help his family survive. He had found a human instead. Humans were strange creatures. Intelligence files called them persistent predators and warned that they were more dangerous than they appeared. But this one did not look dangerous. She looked small and tired and cold, and she was offering to help. "My mate is injured," said. His voice was deep and rough, and his galactic standard was heavily accented. "She needs medical attention. My cubs are with her. They are afraid." Nodded, she did not hesitate. She picked up her medical kit and her pack of supplies. She wrapped her thermal blanket around her shoulders. "Take me to them," she said. Did not understand this human. He did not trust her, but he had no choice. His family needed help, and she was the only one offering. He turned and walked back into the frozen night. And followed. The walk to the crash site was the longest of his life. Moved fast. His long legs carried him over the ice and snow like it was nothing. Had to almost run to keep up with him, her shorter legs struggling against the frozen ground. The wind screamed around them, throwing snow into her face, making it hard to see. But she did not complain. She did not ask him to slow down. She knew that somewhere ahead, a mother was dying and children were afraid. The crashed ship was worse than she had expected. It lay on its side like a dead animal, broken and burning in places. Smoke rose from holes in the hull. Pieces of metal were scattered across the ice for hundreds of meters in every direction. Did not understand how anyone had survived. But someone had. She could hear them now. Small voices, high and frightened, coming from inside the wreckage, and another voice, weaker, trying to comfort them. Climbed into the ship through a crack in the hull. Followed, her smaller body fitting through spaces he had to squeeze past. Inside, the ship was dark and cold. Emergency lights flickered red. The air smelled like smoke and blood and fear. She found them in what was left of the sleeping quarters. Lay on a pile of blankets, her dark fur matted with blood. She was breathing but barely. Her eyes were closed and her face was twisted with pain. Could see the wound on her side, deep and ugly, still bleeding slowly. And around her, like small guards trying to protect their queen, were the cubs. There were 3 of them. The oldest was a male, maybe 8 years old in human terms. He was trying to look brave, his small claws out, his teeth bared. But his eyes were wet with tears he would not let fall. The middle one was a female, younger and smaller, her fur a lighter shade than her brother's. She held a piece of broken metal like a weapon, though she clearly did not know how to use it. And the youngest was tiny, barely more than a baby, curled up against his mother's side and whimpering softly. When they saw, they tried to be fierce. The oldest let out a growl that he probably meant to be scary. It came out shaky and thin. The female raised her piece of metal and shouted something in that did not understand. The baby just stared at her with huge, frightened eyes. Stopped, she did not move closer. She did not raise her hands or make any sudden movements. She simply knelt down on the cold floor, making herself as small as possible, and waited. "It's okay," she said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm here to help your mother." The cubs did not understand her words, but they understood her voice. It was quiet and gentle, like water flowing over stones. It was the voice their own mother used when they had bad dreams. It was the voice of someone safe. The oldest cub, whose name was, looked at his father, gave a small nod. He still did not trust this human but was dying. He had no choice. Lowered his claws. His sister put down her piece of metal. The baby Little kept staring at with those huge eyes. Moved slowly toward, she opened her medical kit and looked at the wound. It was bad, very bad. The bleeding had slowed, but infection was setting in. His body was burning with fever. "I need clean water," said, "and light, better light than this." Found a working lamp in the wreckage. He melted snow in a container over a chemical fire. He watched as this tiny human worked on his mate with steady hands and calm focus. Cleaned the wound. She used medicine from her kit to fight the infection. She stitched the torn flesh with thread made for human skin, hoping it would work on bodies too. She worked for 2 hours without stopping, her hands never shaking, her breathing never changing. The cubs watched her the whole time. Stood by the door, ready to fight or run if needed. Sat with her back against the wall, her eyes never leaving his hands. And Little slowly, carefully, crept closer and closer until he was sitting right next to her. Noticed but did not react. She kept working on, talking softly as she did. "Your mother is strong," she said, not knowing if the cubs could understand her. "She's fighting hard. She's going to be okay." Little made a small sound. Not a growl, not a whimper, something in between. Glanced at him and saw that he was shaking, not from cold, from fear. She wanted to reach out and comfort him, but she knew she could not yet. He was a predator's child, raised to see softness as weakness. If she touched him now, he might bite her, or his father might kill her. So she just kept talking, her voice warm and steady, a river of sound that filled the cold silence. "I had a grandmother," she said as she worked. "Her name was. She lived in a small apartment in a city called Seoul on a planet called Earth. When I was scared, she would hold me and sing to me. Old songs, songs from long ago. She told me that as long as someone was singing, everything would be okay." Little had stopped shaking. He was listening, finished the last stitch on his wound and sat back. The woman's breathing was easier now. Her fever was still high, but the medicine was working. She would live, probably. "We need to move her," said Tu. "This ship is too cold, too damaged. There's a facility 3 kilometers from here. It has walls, heat. She can rest there." Looked at her for a long moment. In his world, no one helped without wanting something in return. Every gift was a trap. Every kindness was a weapon. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Shrugged. "Because you needed help, because I could give it." "That is not an answer." "It's the only one I have." Did not understand, but he helped her anyway. He lifted in his arms, careful of her wound, gathered the blankets, carried the medical kit, and Little, without anyone telling him to, reached up and took his hand. His small claws pressed against her palm. They could have cut her skin open, but they didn't. He held her hand like a human child would, seeking comfort in her touch. Looked down at him. He looked up at her, and something passed between them that needed no words. They walked out into the frozen night together. The trip back to the facility was slower this time, could not move fast while carrying. The cubs were tired and cold. The wind was getting worse, but kept them moving. She kept talking, her voice rising above the wind. She told stories about Earth, about cities made of glass and metal, about oceans so big you could not see the other side. She told them about animals called dogs and cats that lived with humans, not as prey, but as friends. She told them about a thing called snow that fell from the sky on cold days, and how human children would play in it and build figures out of it. The cubs listened. They did not understand all the words, but they understood her voice. It was warm in all this cold. It was light in all this dark. When they finally reached the facility, was Holding's other hand, was walking close beside her, and Little had not let go once. They went inside, they found warmth, they found safety. And for the first time since the crash, the cubs stopped trying to be brave. The first night in the facility was the hardest. Fever rose and fell like waves on a stormy sea. Stayed by her side, checking her wound, giving her medicine, wiping the sweat from her fur with a damp cloth. She did not sleep. She could not. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the wound opening again, saw the infection spreading, saw this mother dying while her children watched. Sat in the corner watching everything. He did not help. He did not speak. He just watched with those yellow eyes that missed nothing. Knew he was waiting for her to fail, waiting for proof that her kindness was a trick. She did not blame him. His whole life had taught him that the universe was cruel and cold and full of enemies. One small human was not going to change that in a single night. But she was going to try. The cubs huddled together near the fire had built. They were exhausted and scared. Was trying to stay awake, his eyes fighting to stay open, but his body kept betraying him. His head would drop, then snap back up. Had given up the fight. She was curled into a ball, her breathing slow and steady, but her face was troubled even in sleep. And Little sat between them, his eyes wide open, staring at like she was a puzzle he needed to solve. Around midnight, woke up. Her eyes opened slowly and she made a sound of pain and confusion. Was at her side in an instant, taking her hand, speaking to her in soft words that did not understand. Looked at him, then at the room around her, then at the human sitting nearby. "Who?" she whispered. "A human," said. "She saved your life." Stared at for a long moment. Then she closed her eyes and said something else in. His whole body tensed. He looked at with new eyes, and for the first time there was something other than suspicion in them. "She says thank you," he translated. "She says you have the heart of a warrior." Shook her head. "I'm not a warrior, I'm just a scientist. I study small things, bacteria, microbes, things you need a machine to see." That is not what she means. Paused, searching for the right words. In our culture, a warrior is not just someone who fights. A warrior is someone who protects, someone who stands between danger and those who cannot protect themselves. He looked at his mate, at his children. "You did that. You are a warrior." Did not know what to say, so she said nothing. She just nodded and went back to checking his wound. The night grew longer. The wind outside screamed louder, and slowly, one by one, the cubs began to break. Was the first. She woke from her troubled sleep with a cry, her small body shaking. Nightmares. Recognized them immediately. She had them too after the crash. Dreams of falling, of metal tearing, of being alone in the cold forever. Looked around wildly, not recognizing where she was. Her eyes found, and for a moment fear flashed across her face. But then she remembered. The human. The one who had helped her mother. The one with the warm voice. She did not run to. That would be too much, too fast. Instead, she crept closer, pretending she was just moving to get warmer. She sat down a meter away from where was working, her eyes watching everything. "Bad dream?" asked softly. Nodded. She did not speak. She did not know enough human words. "I have those too," said. "Almost every night since my ship crashed, I dream about falling, about being alone, about nobody coming to find me." His ears went up. She understood some of that, falling, alone. "But then I wake up," continued, "and I remember that I'm still alive, that I survived, and that's something. That's a lot, actually." Thought about this. Then slowly, carefully, she moved closer and closer until she was sitting right next to, her shoulder almost touching the human's arm. Did not react. She kept working on, checking her temperature, adjusting her blankets, but she was aware of the small, warm body beside her, and she was grateful for it. An hour later, was asleep against side. Lasted longer. He was the eldest. He had responsibilities. He had to be strong for his siblings, for his mother, for his father who was carrying so much weight. He could not show weakness. He could not give in. But he was 8 years old, and he was so tired. Saw him fighting. She saw his eyes closing and opening, closing and opening. She saw the way his body swayed, and she made a decision. She started to hum. It was a song her grandmother had taught her long ago, a song about mountains and rivers and a small bird flying home. It had no words, just a melody that rose and fell like breathing. Her grandmother had hummed it to help her sleep, now hummed it to help these cubs. The effect was immediate. The breathing grew deeper, more peaceful. Little's wide eyes finally began to close and stopped fighting. He did not he did not touch her, but he stopped moving away. He let himself lie down on the floor near the fire. He let his eyes close. He let the humming carry him into sleep. Only Little remained awake. He sat very still, watching with those huge eyes. He was the youngest, barely more than a baby. He did not understand much of what had happened. He just knew that his mother was hurt, that his father was scared, and that this strange creature without fur or claws had appeared from nowhere and made things better. He wanted to go to her. He wanted to curl up in her arms like he curled up with his mother, but he was afraid. What if she pushed him away? What if she didn't want him? Saw his struggle. She saw the way his small body leaned toward her, then pulled back. She saw the need in his eyes. She stopped humming. She put down the medical tools, and slowly, gently, she opened her arms. Little ran to her. He crashed into her chest with all the force his small body could manage. His claws dug into her jacket. His face buried itself in her shoulder, and he made a sound, a high, keening sound that was not quite a cry and not quite a howl. It was the sound of a child who had been holding everything inside, finally letting it all out. Held him. She wrapped her arms around his small, furry body and held him tight. She rocked back and forth, the way her grandmother had rocked her. She hummed the mountain song again, soft and slow. "It's okay," she whispered. "I've got you. You're safe now. I've got you." Little's shaking slowly stopped. His crying faded to whimpers, then to silence. His breathing grew slow and steady. He was asleep, held in the arms of a human, a species his people called enemy. Watched all of this. He watched his children, one by one, give themselves to this stranger. He watched the way she held his youngest son, with a tenderness he had never seen from anyone outside his own family. He watched her hum that strange, soft song that seemed to carry more power than any weapon. And something inside him, something hard and cold and ancient, began to crack. He did not understand this human. He did not understand her kindness, her gentleness, her willingness to give everything to those who had given her nothing. It went against everything he knew about the universe. But maybe, he thought as he watched his children sleep peacefully for the first time in days, maybe the universe was bigger than he knew. Maybe there was room in it for this too. 6 days passed on the frozen moon. Grew stronger. The fever broke on the 3rd day, and by the 5th she was sitting up and eating. She still could not walk far, but her eyes were clear and her voice was steady. She was going to live. The cubs changed too, though in a different way. They no longer tried to be fierce around. They no longer pretended they did not need her. Still tried to act grown up, but caught him smiling when she told stories. Followed her everywhere, asking questions in broken galactic standard that tried her best to answer. And Little had become her shadow, holding her hand whenever she moved, sleeping against her side every night. Even had changed. He still did not talk much, but the suspicion was gone from his eyes. He helped gather supplies and fix the heating system. He listened when she spoke. And once, when she slipped on the ice outside the facility, he caught her before she fell. "Thank you," she said. He grunted. "You have helped my family, I help you. It is, what is the human word, fair?" Smiled. "Fair works." On the sixth day, the rescue ships came. Saw them first. Three black shapes dropping through the gray sky, their engines burning bright against the clouds. Warships, smaller than crashed vessel, but still large and dangerous. She felt her stomach tighten with old fear. She called, "Someone's coming." He came to stand beside her, watching the ships descend. His body was tense, but there was relief in his eyes. "The fleet," he said. "They found us." The ships landed in a line half a kilometer from the facility. Doors opened. Soldiers poured out, their weapons ready, their movements sharp and practiced. They spread out in formation and began moving toward the building. "I should hide," said. Shook his head. "No, you saved my mate, you cared for my cubs, you will stand with us." "They might not understand. Humans and are not exactly friends." "Then I will make them understand." The cubs gathered around as the soldiers approached. Little held her hand, stood close to her other side, even positioned himself nearby as if ready to defend her. Watched from inside, too weak to stand for long, but her eyes were fierce and proud. The first soldier through the door was a captain named. He was older than, his fur streaked with gray, his face covered in scars from 100 battles. He stopped cold when he saw the scene before him. Commander, the Butcher of 7, the conqueror of 3 star systems, was sitting on the floor. His cubs were gathered around a tiny human female with no claws and no fangs, and the human was teaching them to play some kind of clapping game, their small paws hitting her soft hands in a pattern that made them laugh. Blinked, he looked at the human, he looked at the cubs, then he looked back at. "Commander," he said slowly, "what is happening here?" Stood, "Captain, I am glad you found us. We tracked your emergency beacon. It took days to fight through the asteroid field." Eyes went back to, "Who is this?" "A survivor from another crash, a human scientist." His hand moved to his weapon. "Humans are not to be trusted, the intelligence files say." "The intelligence files are wrong." The words hung in the air like thunder, had spoken quietly, but his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. Every soldier in the room went still. "Commander," said carefully, "you cannot mean that." "I mean every word," stepped forward. "This human found us when we were dying. She healed my mate's wounds with her own hands. She kept my children warm when I could not. She sang them to sleep when they were afraid." His voice dropped to a growl. "You will treat her with honor, Captain, or you will answer to me." Stared at him. In the military, challenging a captain was serious, but was more than a captain. He was a legend. His word carried power that rank alone could never give. "The High Council will want to know about this," said finally. "Then tell them exactly what happened here." One of the younger soldiers pushed forward. His fur was still dark, his eyes bright with the fire of youth. "She could be a spy," he said. "Humans are clever, they could have planned this." Little made an angry sound. He stepped in front of his small body, placing itself between her and the soldier. "No," he said. His galactic standard was rough and childish, but his meaning was clear. "She is good. She is Mother." The room went completely silent. Mother, it was not just a name. In culture, the mother bond was sacred. It was the deepest connection a child could have. To give that name to an outsider, especially to a member of another species, was unheard of. Looked at the small cub standing in front of the human. He looked at the way and had moved to flank her as well. He looked at the expression on his face, a mixture of pride and wonder that had never seen before. "Commander," he said slowly, "I think you need to tell me the whole story." So told him. He told him about the crash, about finding in the abandoned facility, about how she had followed him into the storm to help strangers. He told him about the long nights when she worked on his wound, about the songs she hummed to calm his frightened children, about the way she had opened her arms to a crying cub who should have been her enemy. He told him everything. When he finished, was quiet for a long time. The other soldiers shifted uncomfortably. This was not what they had expected. They had come to rescue warriors. They had found something else entirely. "The council will not believe this," said finally. "Then bring her before them," replied. "Let them see for themselves." She looked back at him steadily, her eyes calm, her hand still holding Little's. "Human," he said, "you are not afraid." Thought about the question. Was she afraid? She was standing in a room full of predators who could kill her without effort. She was about to be taken to the heart of an empire that had been humanity's enemy for generations. Every logical part of her brain said she should be terrified. But she looked down at Little, at his huge eyes full of trust. She looked at and standing beside her like she was worth protecting. She looked at, watching from inside and standing tall and proud. "No," she said, "I'm not afraid." Studied her for another long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "Very well, we will take you to the council will decide what to do with you." He paused. "For what it is worth, human, I hope they decide well. What you did here was unusual, but it was not wrong. It was not a promise. It was not even a compliment exactly. But from a captain, it was more than had expected." "Thank you," she said. Turned to his soldiers. "Prepare the ships. We leave within the hour." He looked back at one more time. "And someone get this human a proper coat. She looks cold." Little tugged on his hand. "We go home now?" he asked. Smiled and squeezed his small paw gently. "Yes," she said, "we go home." She did not know what waited for her on the. She did not know if the council would welcome her or condemn her. She did not know if she would ever see Earth again. But she knew one thing for certain. She was not alone anymore. There was called Prime. Saw it through the window of the warship as they approached. It was a dark world, covered in thick forests and deep oceans. Its sun was red, and its light painted everything in shades of blood and shadow. It looked nothing like Earth with its blue skies and green fields. It looked dangerous. It looked like a place where only the strong survived. And yet, as pressed her hand against the cold glass, she did not feel afraid. Little stood beside her as he always did now. He was looking at his with wide eyes, pointing out landmarks to in his broken mix of and galactic standard. That was where his grandmother lived. That was the forest where his father had taken him hunting once. That was the city where the High Council met. "It is big," he said, "bigger than Moon." Smiled much bigger. "You will like it. I will show you everything." Came up on the other side. She had learned more galactic standard in the past few days, practicing constantly, determined to be able to talk to properly. "The council is scary," she said seriously. "They are old and mean, but you are not scared. You are never scared." "I'm scared sometimes," admitted. "Everyone gets scared." Shook her head. "Not you. You are brave like father." Did not argue. But she thought about all the times in the past days when she had been terrified and had simply kept going anyway. Maybe that was what being brave meant. Not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear win. The ship landed in the capital city, in a plaza in front of a massive building made of black stone. Had never seen architecture like it. It was beautiful and frightening at the same time, full of sharp angles and deep shadows. It looked like a predator waiting to pounce. Soldiers lined the path from the ship to the building. They stood perfectly still, their eyes following as she walked between them. She kept her head up and her step steady. She would not give them reason to think her weak. Walked beside her with on his other side. Was still recovering, but she had insisted on coming. "If you face the council," she had told, "you will not face them alone." The cubs walked behind them, trying to look dignified. Had smoothed his fur and straightened his posture. Had cleaned her claws. And Little was doing his best not to run ahead, though could see him bouncing on his feet with every step. They entered the council chamber. It was vast. The ceiling was so high that could barely see it. The walls were covered in banners and weapons from 1,000 conquered worlds. And at the far end, on thrones made of dark metal, sat the High Council. There were 7 of them. They were ancient, their fur silver with age, their eyes cold with centuries of seeing the worst the universe had to offer. They looked at like she was an insect that had wandered into their territory. The council leader spoke first. Her name was Matriarch and her voice was like thunder echoing through mountains. "Commander, you bring a human before us. Explain." Stepped forward and told the story. He told it clearly and completely, leaving nothing out. He described the crash, the injury, the human who had come out of nowhere and saved everything he loved. He described his children's transformation, their bond with this strange, soft creature. He described his own journey from suspicion to respect. When he finished, the council was silent. Matriarch leaned forward. "Human, come closer." Walked forward until she stood alone in the center of the chamber. She could feel every eye on her. The weight of judgment pressed down like a physical force. "You saved the mate and children of one of our greatest warriors," said. "Why?" "Because they needed help." "That is not an answer. You are human. We are, your people fear us. Our people consider you prey. Why would you risk your life for enemies?" Thought carefully before answering. "On my world we have a saying, there are no strangers, only friends we haven't met yet. I know that sounds naive. I know your people have built an empire on strength and fear. But when I saw Commander's family, I didn't see enemies. I saw a father who was scared for his children. I saw a mother who was hurt and needed care. I saw 3 cubs who just wanted to feel safe." She paused, looking around at the ancient faces watching her. "I don't know much about politics or war. I'm just a scientist who studies small things, but I know that kindness is never wasted. I know that helping someone when they need it most can change everything. And I know that your cubs, those 3 children sitting behind me right now, they are not monsters. They are just kids. They laugh and cry and get scared in the dark, just like human children." Little suddenly broke free from his father's grip. Before anyone could stop him, he ran across the chamber and threw himself wrapping his small arms around her legs. "Mother," he said loudly, not caring that the entire council was watching, "don't let them send you away." The council stared. A small cub, son of their greatest commander, was calling a human mother and clinging to her like she was his whole world. This was something they had never seen, something they had never imagined possible. Knelt down and took Little's face in her hands. She spoke to him gently, softly, in words meant only for him. "I'm not going anywhere, little one. I promise." She stood up again, Little's hand in hers, and faced the council. "You asked why I helped them. Here is my answer. I helped them because that's what humans do. We're not the strongest species in the galaxy. We don't have claws or fangs or armor, but we have something else. We have the ability to love strangers, to protect people who cannot protect themselves, to see someone in need and say, 'I will help you,' even when it costs us everything." She squeezed hand. "Where I come from, we have another saying. It takes a village to raise a child. I think maybe it takes a galaxy. And if there's any chance at all, that my being here can help build that kind of galaxy, then I'll take it." The council was silent for a long time. The members looked at each other, communicating in glances and subtle movements that could not read. They were deciding her fate, and there was nothing she could do but wait. Finally, Matriarch spoke. "In all my years, I have never seen a child give the mother name to an outsider. I have never seen one of our warriors defend a human with such passion, and I have never heard a human speak to us with such honest courage." She paused. "The universe is changing, and we must change with it. Perhaps it is time for them to learn something new." She rose from her throne. "Human Park, you are granted the status of protected guest of the Empire. You may stay as long as you wish. You will be treated with honor." She looked at Little, still holding his hand. "And it seems you have already been accepted by the only judges who truly matter." Felt tears pricking at her eyes. She bowed deeply. "Thank you, Matriarch." The years that followed were not easy. Change never is. But slowly, something shifted in the relationship between humans and diplomatic missions were sent. Cultural exchange programs were started. The first cubs enrolled in human schools, where they learned that strength and gentleness could exist together. Stayed on Prime for 5 years, serving as a bridge between the two peoples. She taught children about Earth, and she taught human diplomats about culture. She helped translate misunderstandings before they became conflicts. She showed, again and again, that different did not have to mean enemy. When she finally returned to Earth, she was not alone. She brought with her 3 young who had grown from frightened cubs into confident young adults, was training to be a diplomat, was studying xenobiology, following in footsteps, and now tall and strong but still prone to holding her hand, had become her official cultural liaison. And every year, on the anniversary of that crash on the frozen moon, messages arrived from all across the empire. Drawings from cubs, letters from parents, stories of humans and working together, learning from each other, becoming friends. They all ended the same way, those messages. 3 words, written in shaky galactic standard by clawed hands that had never been designed for writing. Thank you, Mother. Kept every single one.